I'm Lezette Thomason from Children's Corner, and I'm going to show you how to sew the bottom of a lined dress top or skirt. On a garment where we're going to sew the bottom, we need to have some reference points marked. There will be 4 reference points: the side seams, and then you need to mark the center front and the center back of both your dress and your dress lining with a washout marking pen. At one side seam, I am going to separate the dress from the dress lining. Right now, the wrong sides are together. To sew the dress bottom, I need right sides together. So holding one side seam in one hand, the lining side seam in the other hand, I am going to flip them around and put them right sides together at that side seam. I'll put a pin there. Now I'm going to show you this one more time. At one side seam with wrong sides together, I'm going to separate the dress from the dress lining, and I am going to hold each in separate hands, and I want to flip them around so that right sides are together. So I'm going to flip and put right sides together, match up that side seam, and place a pin there to hold in place, just like that. Now, keeping my raw edges together, I'm going to pin garment to garment lining around the bottom until I get to the center front mark. Be very careful not to stretch either of the fabrics. Keep those raw edges together. Now, this section from the center front or the center back to one side seam is ready to sew. I have my pinned area from center front to the side seam at my sewing machine, and using a 1/4 inch foot, I'm going to start by back stitching, and I'm going to sew this one section of my garment, sewing the bottom edge of the garment to the bottom edge of the garment lining. When I get to the side seam, I'm going to back stitch. Now, I have stitched 1/4 of the way around my garment. We will do the next section, the next 1/4 of the garment, just the same, and then the 3rd section just the same. This is the first section of my dress that I have stitched from the center to the side seam, stitching the dress to the garment lining. The next thing I will do would be to trim just the section that I have sewn and then turn it to the right side. And then you're going to be ready to pin and stitch the next fourth, and then after you've stitched that section, trim it, then pin and stitch the third section and trim and turn it. After you have stitched 3/4 of your skirt, it will look like this. The bottom will be sewn to the lining except for that one last section. And now I'm going to show you how to do that, because when you sewed the side seams of your lining, in one of them the instructions told you to leave a hole in the lining. Here is my hole that is in the lining. So I'm going to put my hand through the hole between the garment and the garment lining, and I'm going to take hold of that section that is not stitched and pull that section through the hole. Now your dress is going to get a little wadded up in order to do this, but by doing it this way, it avoids the dress or the dress lining from getting stretched out of shape. So now I'm going to just pin this section together with raw edges together, and I will be ready to stitch this section. I now have that last 1/4 of my dress bottom under the sewing machine. I'm continuing with my 1/4 inch foot, and I have my dress and my lining pinned together. I'm going to start at a place where I left off, back stitch, and then stitch this last section, taking out the pins as I get to them. And when I get around to the point where I started stitching, I'll back stitch again and trim that final section. After I have trimmed that final section, I'm going to push the whole thing back through that opening that we left in our lining, and the bottom of my garment is now entirely stitched, ready to be pressed, and the last little bit of stitching we have to finish this garment is to whip that opening in the lining together by hand.